So as many of you guys already know, Pentax just released their first brand new film camera, the Pentax 17, a compact half-frame film camera, which by the way, some people want to call the Pentax 1.7. That's a homage to the 6.7, of course. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. Personally, I kind of like it. But today I wanted to talk about 10 things you should know about the Pentax 17 and include some tips for shooting as well as how to get the best possible results from this camera. Now, if you guys haven't seen my full review on the Pentax 17, I will be linking it in the cards up above, so definitely check that out. And just as a result for shooting it for a couple of weeks, I've been able to kind of learn a few things about how to truly maximize the results from the camera, and I want to share that with you guys today. And as I do in all of my other videos, I will be breaking them down as simple as possible. With that said, here are 10 things you should know about the Pentax 17. All right, so the first thing you should know about the Pentax 17, which is probably one of the most important things in my opinion, is getting high resolution scans. Now, if you are scanning film yourself, you want to be sure to use a DPI that is high enough because you're not going to be scanning a traditional 35mm frame. You're going to be scanning about half of it, hence half frame camera. But if you're someone who's going to be sending their film out to get it developed and scanned by a professional lab, I highly recommend you opt for the high resolution scans, and high resolution scans are going to allow you to get the best possible results from this camera. Now, the second thing you should know about the Pentax 17 is the zone focus symbol hack. Now, as you guys know, the Pentax 17 is a zone focus camera, and if you look on top of the focusing ring, it's going to show a couple of different symbols. Now, each of the symbols on the focus ring represents the distance of focus that your camera is set to. Now, here's the thing, if you've never zone focused before, this could be a little bit of a learning curve. And so one thing that I would recommend doing is taking a screenshot of this thing right here. This is essentially just the table inside of the Pentax 17 manual, and setting it as your screensaver, so that if you are out in the field and you are going to make a photograph, all you have to do is pull up your iPhone screensaver and use that as a reference point to see what distance you have for focus based on the symbol that you have selected. This made shooting with this camera extremely simple, and honestly, if you are new to zone focusing, I highly recommend you do this. With that said, the third thing you should know about this camera is that on the bottom of the focus ring, you actually have the distances displayed in both meters and feet. So just because on the top here you have the symbols, if you don't remember what distances represent each of these symbols, you can look at the very bottom, and this little line is going to tell you literally where your camera is focused to. Let me try to get a nice little zoom in on that here. So I don't know if you could see that there, but it goes from about 0.82 feet all the way to infinity, and that's going to ensure that you're able to accurately focus your camera and, use this as well as the screenshot to never miss focus on any of your photographs. Now, my fourth point here is going to be talking about the auto mode. Now, auto mode is, in my opinion, the best shooting mode on this camera because it allows your camera to pretty much read the scene based off of what it sees through the lens and select the proper shooting mode for you. And be rest assured that when you are in full auto mode, your camera will do all of the work for you. If it needs flash, it'll activate flash. If it doesn't need flash, it'll shoot in the standard program mode. For me personally, this is what I had the camera in about 90% of the time while I was out photographing with it, just because it makes the shooting process extremely simple and you don't really need to put any thought into it. Now, the fifth thing you should know about the Pentax 17 is the differences between both of the different program modes. Now, this was one of the most confusing things for me when I first looked at the camera, but after diving in a little bit deeper into the manual, it's actually pretty simple and straightforward. So as you can see here on the dial, there's going to be two different P labels. There's going to be one in a white bracket and there's going to be one in an orange bracket. Now, let's talk about the first P here under the white bracket. When you are in this mode, it is standard program mode. So your camera is going to read the scenes, it's going to see what the available light is like and make a meter reading to get the proper exposure on your camera. So if you shoot it in P, all you have to do is point and shoot and you will get properly exposed images. The main difference is in the program mode that has the orange on it, you now have the ability to shoot with flash. So it's still program mode, but now you're going to add that additional functionality of the flash. Now, one thing that I really love about the Pentax 17 is all the different functionality that you get from this camera. Even though it is a semi-automatic camera, there are a ton of different things that allow you to override that to make really artistic choices. Now, before we continue on, I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which are the good folks over at Skillshare. Now, Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of different classes from industry experts across film, photography, illustration, design, product productivity, and much more. And one of my goals for this summer was to really dive deeper into the world of cinematography and editing. And so I took a class on Skillshare called Edit Eye-Catching Videos in Final Cut Pro, where I learned a ton about cinematic hook-grabbing intros. In fact, if you watch my last video on the Pentax 17, there were a lot of things that I learned off of Skillshare that I actually implemented into that intro. So it really has helped me kind of progress over to the next level. Skillshare can help you take your hobbies, your career, your skills, or your passions to the next level. The first 500 people to use my link, you guys are gonna get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare completely free. So be sure to hop on that deal, use the link in the description below, and huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this episode. All right, let's get back to it. So the next thing that you should know about the Pentax 17 is that the exposure compensation dial overrides and works in every shooting mode. So it doesn't matter if you are in auto or if you are in program with the flash on, you can still adjust the exposure compensation simply by turning this dial, which is honestly really, really useful because there were times when I was photographing with this camera where things were just extremely backlit and I needed to be able to expose for the foreground, but I didn't want to use flash. And so the exposure compensation dial really, really helped with that. So the 7th thing you should know about the Pentax 17 is that when you load the camera up with film, they tell you in the manual that you need to advance it all the way to 0 before you start making your photographs. Well, here's a little tip. If you want to get this cool film burn effect that you get at the start of every single roll on a traditional roll of film, you can still achieve this. Simply load your film in, and rather than shooting until 0, make 2 exposures. So click, wind, click, wind, and on your 3rd or 4th shot, you will get that nice film burn. Now, this is a little bit tricky because depending on how much leader you give your film roll, it could kind of affect the positioning of the film, so you might not get the film burn. But from my testing, if you make 2 exposures by your 3rd or 4th frame, you will be able to get that film burn, and there's a ton of cool creative effects you can do with that. All right, so the 8th thing you should know about the Pentax 17 is this little window here on the back of the camera. So for many of you guys that already shoot film, you probably already know about this, but if you're first getting into film photography, this little window is meant to be a display for the different film that you're shooting. So on a traditional 35mm roll of film, you're gonna get a box with it. And on the box, you can rip off that front tag right there and stick it on the back of your camera on this little window. And there it is, everyone. So this is also just a reminder for, what type of film you have loaded in your camera. You're getting 72 images per roll of film on the Pentax 17, which is an insane amount. And 72 images is really, really hard to get through for most people. And so, a lot of times you'll shoot the camera, make maybe 20 frames in a day, put the camera down, and you maybe go a week or 2 without shooting it, and you come back and you'll forget what film you're shooting. Well, with the addition of this, now you can know what film you have loaded inside. It's pretty simple. It's on most film cameras, but it's a nice touch from Pentax knowing that you are getting 72 frames per roll of film. You won't forget anymore what film you have loaded inside. Now, the next tip is going to be talking about the frame lines inside of the viewfinder. So as I mentioned in my review, you're gonna get 2 different sets of frame lines. You're gonna get your regular, degular frame line, which is gonna be that larger one on the outside, and then you're gonna get that smaller one, which Pentax labels as their close-up compensation visual frame line, which basically means the parallax is adjusted. Now, if you're gonna be photographing in distances further than 5 feet, you wanna use your regular frame line. But if you're photographing with distances closer than 4 feet, so 4 feet, 1.7 feet, 0.82 feet, you wanna use that smaller one because that's going to properly adjust for where your frame is going to be. One easy way to remember this is if you look at the top of the focus ring, you're gonna see that singular kind of outline of a person standing there. Anything past that to your right, you need to use the close focus frame line, and anything past it to your left, you want to use your regular frame lines. This is extremely important to keep in mind, folks, and so make sure you really, really pay attention to your close focus frame lines. And the last thing you should know about this camera is the differences between the crescent moon flash and just your regular flash symbol. Now, the crescent moon flash, which is going to be displayed in that orange bracket under the program mode, you're going to want to use this when you are photographing indoors. That's going to give you the best possible flash settings. But as for the other one, you want to use that during the daytime for a full flash. So let's say, for example, the light source is behind the person and then, your subject is kind of dark. Use the daytime flash to be able to give yourself a little fill flash and properly expose your subject. And that's kind of the difference between the two. But if you really, really don't know what to use in what situations, you could honestly just put it into the program mode with the flash on, and your camera is intelligent enough to be able to differentiate which one to use. So just a little tip for you guys who like to use flash with film. I personally love it. It gives me that nice party look, and it's extremely cool how Pentax implemented these two features. All right, so that's gonna wrap it up for 10 things you should know about the Pentax 17. Leave in the comment section down below if you guys have any other things to add. I know I probably missed a few. A huge thank you to everyone who watched this video, and also subscribe for more film photography videos. But that's gonna wrap it up for me. I'll see you guys in the next one. As always, Pentax Gaming.